There are some pretty fascinating myths and folklore throughout the course of baseball history, stuff we either don't fully know happened or how real it was. Babe Ruth calling a shot, the Cubs losing the 1918 World Series on purpose for money, the Yankees having a mascot at one point, there being a World Series in 2005, and the Dodgers winning a championship since 1988. Whatever it may be, it's all interesting stuff to look into, to investigate, or just read into what actually is the truth, how real or close to the story the actual event really was. And there's one specific baseball myth that nobody seems to believe. Very few fans, no players. Really, the only people who at least pretend to believe it's real are the Boston Red Sox. Fenway Park is, of course, more than just a ballpark at this point, or baseball's most beloved ballpark, as they themselves deem it. It's a landmark, a milestone, a place that's been renovated over the years to look even better. There are concerts there. Hell, there's even football, hockey, soccer games played there at times. Just going to Fenway is a big deal. It's even in at least one video game, Fallout 4, which I didn't know. I'm not a gamer, but when you look up videos of Fenway or whatever, you can actually explore Fenway Park in the game, and it's based like 300 years into the future. It's deserted. It's pretty badass. If you've never been to Fenway, I of course highly recommend going. You go inside and there's just so much history you feel in the air, the old and the new, or the old mixed in with the new, I guess is a better way to describe it. There are several things that make Fenway unique and so iconic, but as far as this myth, I'm talking about a seat out in the right field bleachers, a lone red seat among thousands and thousands of dark green colored seats. So why is that? Why is there one random red seat deep out in the right field bleachers? What's the significance of it? In 1946, Ted Williams was just coming back from fighting in World War II for the previous 3.5 years, spending that time in the Marine Corps. So naturally, as you would expect from someone coming back from fighting in a war for years and being on the risk of death for that long, he went and won the MVP his first year back, but the MVP isn't the thing people talk about as much to this day. He connected for 38 home runs that year, but one of them is one of the most significant in baseball history to this day, and that's because of how far it went and where exactly it went. This red seat was installed into Section 42, Row 37, Seat 21 to commemorate one of the most improbable things to ever happen in baseball. And when I say improbable, I mean that's because it probably didn't even happen as much as the Red Sox want it to. The improbable thing is that seat is where the longest home run in Fenway Park history supposedly landed, hit by Ted Williams for a 502-foot home run. Tigers catcher Paul Richards would tell the Atlanta Journal-Constitution that while in the dugout with pitcher Fred Hutchinson between the doubleheader games that day, Hutchinson said he didn't care if Ted Williams was a superstar and wouldn't let him hit like one. So after giving up a bomb to Ted later, Hutchinson sat down angrier than Darth Vader in the Rogue One hallway scene in the clubhouse, with Richards saying, "You really showed that, Williams," then adding to the media, "Here comes a chair flying at me, but I beat it to the door." So Ted hits the moonshot. As a result, the Tigers catcher almost gets hit by a chair thrown by the Tigers pitcher, and as for the baseball hit, the ball allegedly bounced off the head of a fan that was sitting on the bench that would later become Section 42, Row 37, Seat 21, marking the spot. Like I said, this happened in 1946, but the red seat that honors where the home run landed wasn't installed until 1984. And with this being 1946 when he hit it, as you're probably not surprised to hear, there's no footage or actual video evidence of this really happening. So there's no footage. All we have to go by is just being told that this happened and having there be a red seat. But there's at least one supposed witness that we know about, and his name was Joseph Boucher, a 56-year-old construction engineer from Albany, New York. And this is where things get a little like cartoony slash goofy slash this sounds like some story made up just from that time, because according to the story, Boucher is a witness to the home run as he was hit in the head with it. The ball then bounced and went up a dozen rows, and when Boucher took off his hat, he found that the ball that hit him in the head had put a hole through it. Boucher didn't care about getting or keeping the baseball, just being angry if anything, saying that after it hit his head, he was no longer interested and asked the Boston Globe how far he must sit in the ballpark to stay safe, with the Globe putting out a page 1 photo of Boucher the next day, sticking his finger through the hole that was in his hat from the home run ball. Just like if you enjoy these videos, you should stick your finger on that subscribe button if you haven't already. Again, the entire story just sounds so made up, something you'd see in Looney Tunes or some Family Guy skit, but to this day, it is deemed a 502-foot home run that actually happened by the Red Sox. They chalk it up as something that officially happened. As for what everyone else, especially the players, think,
See, now that's some bullshit.
And because this moment is so out there while also being up in the air as to what really went down that day, there's been deep studies to figure out how this would scientifically even work. I think the pretty generally agreed upon consensus is the actual distance of the red seat from home plate, or at least that it was farther than they say. The Red Sox listed at 502, but ESPN analyzed meteorological data and tested various models to figure out how far the ball would have flown if Boucher wasn't sitting in the way, if it didn't hit him in the head, with analysts concluding that the ball would have traveled 530 feet before landing on the ground, since the impact point was approximately 30 feet above field level if it theoretically didn't hit Joseph Boucher, with physicist Alan Nathan saying the ball would have gone 535 feet. Meteorological records showed him the temperature that day, June 9, 1946, was 17 degrees and the wind came 21 miles per hour from the west. Figuring Williams hit the ball at an unusually steep angle of 30.3 degrees and that the ball's speed off the bat was 119.4 miles an hour. So based on those assumptions, the ball would have gone 5 feet farther than the ESPN analysts thought. But again, we all agree it's more, basically. Whether it was 530, 535, 540. As for the players, they could not have any less faith that this happened. And forget about the science that I just briefly went over. In a general logical evolutional sense, forget any rocket science type stuff. Turn off your big brain. Men in the 1940s were nowhere near as strong as they are today, obviously. People are just stronger now. They work out more, whatever. And so just this sheer fact that Ted Williams, just like every other player in baseball at the time, was not as strong. But it's also more so the fact that they were going up against much weaker velocity. I just don't see how anyone, even Ted Williams, could have hit a ball where the red seat is, especially when it's farther than they say. It's not 502, probably more so at least like 530 to 540. So take Ted Williams, not a very buff person in his day, just like everyone else, facing slower velocity, then compare that to two of the biggest power hitters ever for the Red Sox, David Ortiz and Mo Vaughn, who have voiced their disbelief. Two big guys who faced big velocity, with Ortiz literally going out during batting practice with an aluminum bat, yet wasn't close to hitting the red seat, claiming a hurricane would have had to carry the ball that far. And even at this point, I don't think a hurricane would help a ball reach it because the Red Sox themselves won't let that happen. Back in 2001, Manny Ramirez hit a homer that went as far as my dad did when he said he was getting some cigarettes when I was about 5 years old. And the distance measured? 501 feet. One singular foot shy of Ted's alleged red seat homer that probably wasn't even 502. That's the thing. Miguel Sano a few years ago hit a bomb at Fenway measured at 495 feet that Sano himself said he believes it went farther than Ted's, saying he thinks so 100%, adding on that you already know who hit it over there by the red seat, acknowledging that he doesn't think they'll give it to him, but he still thinks his homer went farther. And most recently, Red Sox first baseman Tristan Casas said that the more home runs he hits to right field, the more he feels like the red Ted Williams seat is a myth and that there's no way he could have really hit one that far. The science doesn't back it up. The eye test most certainly doesn't back it up. The lack of any evidence and the cartoonish nature of the story doesn't back it up. But to me, the most solid evidence to counter it being real is the fact that David frickin' Ortiz, one of the most power-centric hitters of all time, took an aluminum bat to try and get the job done, yet still wasn't close. That should tell you everything. So do I believe Ted Williams hit a ball where that red seat is at Fenway Park on June 9th, 1946? No, I don't. But for as much lack of proof as there is for this home run distance being real, there's also nothing that 100% undeniably proves that it's false, meaning it's just unsolved and probably forever will be, which I honestly find to be the best case. It creates fun conversation like this and just makes it all the more intriguing. Not everything needs to have an explicit explanation to it. Sometimes we can have these myths and mysterious things that may or may not be true, and as strongly as it may seem like the red seat didn't happen, unless you have a time machine, we'll still never 100% know what really happened that day.